But I do want to get into another aspect that the Big Ten announced yesterday from a scheduling perspective that I hope the rest of college football adopts moving forward. And that's this. So the schedule hasn't come out yet. We know what the format's going to be. That format's going to be 8 games. Season starts on October 24th weekend. You're going to have the Big Ten Championship played on December 19th. So 8 games in 8 weeks. And obviously, the Big Ten Championship, how the Big Ten is split up, you have an Eastern Division, Western Division. The top of the East will play the top of the West, right? Nothing different, all normal. But here's what they announced that to me that I love. And it's also going to happen championship weekend that I hope the SEC takes a look at, the ACC takes a look at, the Big 12, the Pac-12, and I hope this becomes a real thing going forward, and that's this. So in addition to the top team in the East playing the top team in the West, you're going to have, on that same weekend, championship weekend, the number 2 team in the East take on the number 2 team in the West. So if Ohio State, let's say, wins the East, Wisconsin wins the West. That same weekend, you could have, if Penn State finishes second, Penn State taking on Minnesota. You could have Michigan taking on Nebraska. So the second place team in the East will play the second place team in the West. Third place team in the East will play the third best team in the West, etc. I love this idea. I love this format. I really hope this is something going forward. The Big Ten's obviously doing it to get an extra game in, right? Trying to get as much of this season as possible. And another reason why they put it in is they said that it's basically more of an incentive. It's still an extra game where there's something on the line. Right, sure, if you don't make the Big Ten Championship, sure, you can still fight to be the second best team or the third best team. But it just provides, on paper, a great head-to-head matchup and just gives you a nice what-if, gives you another reason to play. But I hope, going forward, all these other conferences adopt this because, to me, not only is this a great way to schedule an extra game, but also helps conferences overall, their playoff chances, and it boosts their odds of getting in the playoff or getting a second team in the playoff moving forward. Right? Because what is college football really all about? We went from the BCS, or we really went from the polls. Teams would play bowl games, and then after that, you'd have the writers vote who the national champion is. So many times you had split national champions. Then we went to a computer BCS system where you had the computer basically tell you who the number 1 team is, who the number 2 team is, and then we're going to play them. But they're going to play each other for the championship. So you finally have a championship game in college football, but the computers are the one deciding who's going to be in the championship game. Now, we finally have a real playoff for the first time in the 151 years, or 157 years minus 151, and 144 years of college football. You finally implement a playoff. It took 144 years, but they put a college football playoff in. And still, what happens? There's still more debate, there's still more speculation, and it's always argument. That's why I love college football. Is this team better than that team? Is this win better than this loss? That's all it is. We're always doing in college football? We are not only always arguing, we're always looking for answers. That's the one thing we're always searching for. Week in and week out, the college football playoff poll. Just the poll each week. Is this team better than this team? Does this team deserve to be raised this high? We're always looking for answers. And we still really don't have many answers because there's always one team, 2 teams, 1 conference that feels that they got the unfair shake that year. 2 SEC teams get in the playoff. Well, the Big Ten's upset. The Pac-12's upset. 4 of the 5 conferences get in. There's always one conference that's going to be left out no matter what. No matter what, you're going to have a conference champion go 13-0. If every other conference champion goes 13-0, there's still one conference left out. There's always speculation. There's always frustration. And there's always argument. But now, at least, if you can provide more answers, if you can give more clarity, give an extra data point to at least make your case stronger or weaken another conference's case, why wouldn't you want to do it? So you look at conferences, you look at divisions, right? The Big Ten East. You have Penn State, Ohio State, and Michigan State all in one side of the Big Ten. The SEC West, same thing. You have Alabama, you have LSU, you have Auburn. Really good teams. You want to throw Texas A&M in there if they, once in a blue moon kind of show up and play well. But you have a really tough few divisions in college football where you're only going to have one team go to the title game. You're only going to have either Alabama or LSU or Auburn. Only one of those teams are going to go to the SEC title game. So even if you have a great year and you lose and slip up and have 1 loss, well, if it's the wrong loss, you're out. And most likely than not, it ends your playoff hopes. And you really don't have an extra chance to prove yourself. So if Ohio State beats Penn State, and that's Penn State's only loss. LSU beats Alabama, that's Alabama's only loss. Well, essentially, you need either LSU if you're Alabama, or you need Ohio State if you're a Penn State to lose basically twice. And if they're a really good team, that's not happening. So essentially, your season's over. But what happens, because we've seen it before, if teams like Ohio State run the table, teams like LSU, run the table, but they lose in their conference championship game. Now what happens? Now we're arguing if they lose to a team that's not worthy, if that's not that good to where they win that game, they still won't get in the playoff. For example, Clemson, they lose the ACC title game, more likely than not, that team who beats them is not getting the playoff because the ACC is not very good. But now what happens? Well, you provide an extra data point. You provide some more clarity because guess what? Not only do you have that team playing in the conference championship, you can have the second best team in Penn State, in Alabama, still playing a really good opponent on the other side of the bracket or the other side of the division to give you one extra data point. So if Penn State is the number 2 seed, let's say, beats the number 2 seed on the west side, Minnesota, that strengthens Penn State's resume. If Alabama, their only loss was to LSU loses in the SEC title game, well, let's say Alabama's playing Florida. Alabama's playing Georgia, and that matchup of the second best teams in the SEC, that's an extra big win to put on Alabama's resume to boost their argument. Not to mention, it helps to strengthen where if you're trying to get a second team in from your conference, it gives you an extra win to point to say, hey, listen, Penn State's really good. You know how we know? Because they beat the second best team in the West, and they beat them handily. Where Alabama, let's say maybe they lost, or they didn't squeak it out as well, or they didn't play as well, So it provides more information, provides more answers that we're looking for. Not to mention, selfishly, as a college football fan, it provides better games. It provides better opportunities to watch meaningful and better football than you normally would. Because the hope is at least, if you have this weekend, where conference championship weekend, you are aligning number 1 versus number 1, number 2 versus number 2. If you take away a game, hopefully you're taking away one of those terrible non-conference games. Those terrible games where basically you have teams buying to play awful, awful, awful teams. That's why you have Idaho playing Alabama, or Alabama A&M going to play Ohio State. And these just brutal early season games when it's 59-0 at halftime. And it's just one of those games you can't get excited for. It's just an absolute bludgeoning. Hopefully, maybe now you can have LSU Florida as a rematch. Ohio State, let's say Nebraska, Ohio State, Minnesota. USC Washington, USC Oregon, depending on how things shake up in the Pac-12. You can allow for better games to be played that gets more juice. Especially, too, now, let's just look at this one step further. The college football playoff, at some point, is expanding. Sooner rather than later, it's expanding. The pressure is there. The momentum is there. So whether it's 4 years from now, when the contract is up, or it's even earlier than that, it's going to go to 8 teams. And guess what? That last game provides a bigger data point. It provides another example of, hey, listen, this boosts our resume. If you have every conference champion get in, and then it's basically 3 wild cards, so the next 3 best teams, well, having that extra game playing the second best team in your conference, guess what? That helps you. That helps improve your case. So why wouldn't you want that extra data point? Why wouldn't you want that extra boost on your resume to say, hey, listen, we gave you one last opportunity in the last weekend of the year to say, we are really good. We beat this team. We beat the second best team in the SEC. We beat the second best team in the Big Ten. So it helps boost your resume when you're basically having Alabama put their resume up against Penn State. You're having LSU put their resume up against Texas. Or Oregon putting their resume up against Notre Dame. It just helps. Not to mention it provides better games. And if you really are a college football diehard, if you really just love watching any sort of game, think about this. You're going on the same weekend, you're going to have the best teams in your conference playing to determine a champion. You're also going to have the worst teams in your conference playing to determine the loser. You talk about bragging rights. How big of a bragging right is it to not only beat your rival, but then watch them if they are one of the worst teams in the conference, play in a loser bowl, essentially, and lose that. They are officially the worst team in the conference. Just another bragging right, because that's really what college football is. It's all about bragging to your coworkers, bragging to your friends. Hey, my school is better than your school. You know how I know your school is bad? Because you lost to this second worst team, and they stink. You are officially the worst team this year. That's what college football is about. Trash talk rivalries. More of that, the better. So to me, playing an extra game, playing and matching up the best, the slots in your conference. Second best team in the East versus the second best team in the West. Bring it on. I love it. It's a win-win for the league. It's a win-win for the fans. And I hope all these conferences take note and going forward, adopt this schedule. I love it. I absolutely love it. So we're taking your college football thoughts. We're taking your Big Ten thoughts. The Big Ten football is back. 5 weeks from now, Penn State's on the field. Ohio State's on the field. Michigan, Wisconsin, Michigan State, Maryland, whatever. Whatever you're a fan of. Rutgers. Hell, Rutgers is playing. Illinois is playing. Northwestern. Those noon Northwestern Indiana games on a gray, chilly October afternoon with the fan capacity even before social distancing, even before the pandemic, would look like it is now. Right? If you're at Northwestern, if you're at Indiana, Illinois, Rutgers, and you're playing these noon games in November, there's no need to limit the fans there. But that's what makes the experience better. You hear the 3 fans that are there that are upset, that are happy. We are getting that back. Big Ten football is back.